The Path to Heaven or Hell, A Journey of the Mind. Introduction. The question that shapes our fate. What determines our fate after death? Why do some people seem trapped in endless suffering while others enjoy peace and happiness? These questions have puzzled humanity for centuries. Today, we will explore the Buddha's teachings on how our mind, our thoughts, actions, and moral character shapes not only our present life but also our future rebirths. Let's begin with a thought experiment. Imagine waking up in a dark and agonizing place, surrounded by beings enduring immense suffering. Then, shift your mind to a different vision, a world filled with serenity, wisdom, and boundless joy. These are not distant, mythical realms but direct manifestations of our own consciousness. The choices we make today pave the road we will walk in the future. The mind is the architect of our reality. Every thought we cultivate, every action we take, and every virtue we embrace serves as a stepping stone toward either liberation or entrapment. Heaven and hell are not just destinations beyond this life. They are states of being that we create with every moment of our existence. Are we ready to take control of our destiny? Let's embark on this journey together. Chapter 1. The Power of the Mind, Creating Heaven or Hell. The Buddha taught that the mind is the architect of our existence. No external force condemns us to hell, and no divine being grants us entry into heaven. Instead, our own thoughts, actions, and intentions shape our reality. Much like an artist painting on a blank canvas. Every stroke, every color choice, these represent the decisions we make, the habits we cultivate, and the emotions we feed. The mind is a garden. What we plant, we reap. Think of your mind as a garden. If you plant seeds of anger, greed, and ignorance, what will grow? Thorns, weeds, and toxic plants that suffocate everything around them. But if you nurture seeds of kindness, patience, and wisdom, your garden will flourish with beauty and serenity, offering peace not just to yourself but to everyone who enters. This is not just a metaphor, it plays out in real life. Have you ever noticed that some people, no matter how much they have, are never satisfied? They always crave more, always compare, always feel wronged. Their mind is a battlefield, filled with restlessness and suffering. In contrast, others, even in difficult situations, seem calm and content. Their peace doesn't come from external wealth but from an inner foundation of wisdom and gratitude. The hell of the mind. Suffering created from within. Imagine waking up every day filled with resentment. You hold grudges. You envy others. You let small inconveniences ruin your mood. In this state, everything feels like a struggle. A simple traffic jam can trigger rage. A small criticism can feel like a personal attack. This is hell, not a place with fire and demons, but a state of existence we create with our own mind. I once knew someone who was deeply unhappy despite having everything: a good job, a loving family, financial security. Yet, their mind was consumed by negativity. They constantly complained, found faults in others, and saw life as unfair. It didn't matter how much good surrounded them. They lived in a mental prison of their own making. The heaven of the mind, peace and joy from within. Now, picture someone who faces hardships but remains peaceful. They experience loss but do not drown in despair. They meet challenges with resilience. And even in difficult times, they find reasons to be grateful. This is heaven, not a distant paradise, but a state of being we cultivate through wisdom and compassion. There's a reason why great spiritual teachers and monks, who own almost nothing, radiate joy and tranquility. Their happiness does not come from material things but from an unshakable mind, one that has transcended greed, anger, and ignorance. The choice is ours. This realization is both empowering and challenging. It means we cannot blame others or external circumstances for our suffering, but it also means we have the power to transform it. So, what kind of world are you building within your mind? Are you feeding anger, jealousy, and self-pity, creating a personal hell? Or are you cultivating wisdom, kindness, and gratitude, building a personal heaven? The answer is not in the afterlife, it is in every thought, every action, and every moment of awareness. The choice is ours. Chapter 2. The Path to Suffering, How We Create Our Own Hell. Hell is not just a place of fire and torment. As described in religious texts, it is a state of mind. When we act out of anger, jealousy, or selfishness, we imprison ourselves in suffering. But how does this happen? Instead of being punished by external forces, we are the ones who build our own cages, link by link, through our attachment, hatred, and ignorance. Let's explore how these mental habits create a personal hell, and how we can break free. 1. The chains of attachment, trapped by our own desires. One of the greatest sources of suffering is attachment. We cling to material possessions, relationships, status, and even our opinions. But nothing in life is permanent. When these things change or disappear, we experience pain and disappointment. The story of a wealthy merchant and his regrets. There was once a rich merchant who spent his entire life accumulating wealth. He was obsessed with his fortune, never sharing it, and lived in constant fear of losing what he had. When he died, his spirit remained restless, not because he lacked money, but because his attachment had become chains that bound him to suffering. His wealth did not bring him peace. Instead, it became a never-ending cycle of fear, greed, and regret. This happens to many of us in different ways. We tie our happiness to a promotion, a relationship, or external validation. But what happens when we lose these things? We suffer, not because life is unfair, but because we mistakenly believed that happiness depended on something outside of us. The truth is, the tighter we cling, the more we suffer when things slip away. Letting go doesn't mean we stop caring, it means we stop obsessing. 2. The poison of anger, burning ourselves first. When anger takes hold of our mind, we create our own suffering. Hatred is like holding a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else, but we are the ones who get burned first. The story of two brothers and their lifelong feud. Two brothers inherited a family business, but greed led to conflict. They fought over money and power, eventually cutting ties. For decades, they lived in hatred, refusing to speak to each other. Even when they grew old, they held on to their resentment, convinced that the other was at fault. Only on their deathbeds did they realize the truth. They had wasted a lifetime in bitterness. They could have shared laughter, supported each other, and built something greater together. Instead, they chose suffering, but by the time they understood this, it was too late. This is something I've seen in real life too. Families torn apart, friendships ruined, people who hold grudges for years, thinking they are punishing someone else, when in reality, they are just imprisoning themselves in their own anger. Ask yourself, has anger ever truly made you happy? It might give a temporary sense of power, but in the long run, it only drains our energy and darkens our mind. 3. The darkness of ignorance, lost without a light. Ignorance is the root of all suffering. When we do not understand life, we act without wisdom, repeat the same mistakes, and blame others for our pain. But the Buddha taught that suffering is the result of our own karma, our own actions and choices. The story of a lost traveler. A man walked through a dense forest at night without a light. He kept stumbling over roots, getting injured, and cursing the forest for his pain. He blamed the trees, the darkness, and even fate itself. But the truth was simple: he was walking without light. Had he carried a lantern, he would have seen the path clearly and avoided suffering. In the same way, wisdom and mindfulness are the lights that guide us through life. Without them, we remain lost, constantly wondering why we keep falling into suffering, breaking free from our own hell. Hell is not a punishment from an external force. It is the suffering we create through our own choices. Every time we cling too tightly, let anger control us, or refuse to seek wisdom, we build a little more of our own personal hell. But here's the good news: if we created it, we can also escape it. We can loosen the chains of attachment by practicing gratitude and letting go. We can neutralize anger with patience and understanding. We can replace ignorance with wisdom, seeking truth instead of blindly reacting. Chapter 3. The Path to Happiness, Cultivating Inner Peace. Just as a polluted river can be purified over time, so too can our minds be cleansed and transformed through consistent practice. Suffering is not a life sentence, nor is happiness something we stumble upon by chance. Both are cultivated through our thoughts, actions, and understanding. Many people believe that happiness is found in external achievements, wealth, success, relationships, or recognition. While these things may bring temporary pleasure, true, lasting happiness does not come from outside of us. It is something we must cultivate within. The Buddha taught that by practicing generosity, ethical living, and wisdom, we can break free from suffering and nourish a peaceful, joyful mind. These are not just abstract concepts but practical paths that can be applied in daily life. Let's explore the 3 essential pillars of happiness and how they can transform our lives. 1. The power of generosity. Dana, finding joy in giving. One of the simplest yet most powerful ways to cultivate happiness is through giving. When we give freely, whether it's material possessions, kindness, or our time, we break free from the chains of selfishness, fear, and attachment. Many people believe that giving means losing something, but in reality, true generosity enriches both the giver and the receiver. The moment we give from a place of sincerity, we experience a deep sense of joy and connection. The story of a miser who found freedom. There was once a wealthy man who lived in constant fear of losing his fortune. He hoarded his money, never shared, and was suspicious of everyone around him. Despite his riches, he was deeply unhappy, always feeling that he needed more. One day, while walking through the city, he saw an old beggar shivering in the cold. On an impulse, he took off his expensive coat and placed it over the beggar's shoulders. That night, for the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. He realized that the warmth he felt wasn't just from giving away a coat, it was from letting go of his fear and selfishness. From that day forward, he slowly transformed. He began helping others, not out of obligation but because giving brought him more joy than hoarding ever did. Over time, he discovered that true wealth wasn't in gold or possessions, it was in the freedom of an open heart. Why generosity transforms us. When we give freely, we break the illusion that happiness comes from possessing more. True generosity frees us from fear. We realize that we don't need to hoard to feel secure. Giving connects us to others, reminding us that we are all part of something greater. Generosity doesn't have to be about money. A kind word, a helping hand, or simply being present for someone in need can be an act of deep giving. 2. Living ethically. Sila, the foundation of inner peace. Happiness cannot thrive in a mind weighed down by guilt, regret, or inner conflict. Imagine trying to sleep at night after lying, stealing, or hurting someone. The mind will be restless, clouded with worry and self-reproach. Ethical living is not about following rules out of fear, it is about creating the conditions for inner peace. When we act with integrity, we eliminate unnecessary suffering and cultivate a deep sense of self-respect and freedom. The story of the honest merchant. In an ancient town, a merchant was known for his honesty. Even when his competitors used deception to gain wealth, he refused to cheat his customers. Some people mocked him, saying he was too naive to survive in business. But over time, people began traveling from far and wide just to buy from him because they trusted him. His business flourished, but more importantly, his mind was at peace. He never had to look over his shoulder in fear. He never lost sleep worrying about being exposed for dishonesty. His life was simple, yet filled with contentment and dignity. The benefits of ethical living. We avoid unnecessary suffering and conflict with others. We build trust in our relationships, leading to meaningful connections. Our conscience remains clear, allowing for a deep, unshakable inner peace. Ethical living is not about external rewards or punishments, it is about internal liberation. When we act with kindness and integrity, we create a foundation for lasting happiness. 3. The path of wisdom and meditation. Bhavana, mastering the mind. Generosity and ethical living create the right conditions for happiness. But to experience deep, lasting peace, we must train our minds. Have you ever noticed how an unstable, restless mind creates suffering? Even when everything is going well. If our mind is filled with worry, anger, or fear, happiness remains impossible. This is why meditation is so essential. It calms the mind and allows us to see reality clearly. The story of the farmer and the muddy river. A farmer was thirsty and walked to a river to drink, but the water was muddy. Frustrated, he stirred the water, hoping it would clear faster. But the more he stirred, the cloudier it became. Finally, he sat down and waited. Slowly, the mud settled, and the water became clear. Our minds are the same. If we are constantly agitated, distracted, and reactive, we can never see the truth. But through meditation and mindfulness, our mental turbulence settles, revealing clarity, wisdom, and peace. How meditation transforms our life. It reduces stress and anxiety, making life more enjoyable. It helps us see things as they truly are, instead of reacting emotionally. It allows us to experience joy in the present moment, rather than always chasing future happiness. Meditation is not about emptying the mind, it is about understanding it. It is the practice of becoming an observer of our own thoughts rather than being controlled by them. Even 5 minutes a day of mindful breathing can create profound changes over time. The journey toward true happiness. Happiness is not a mystery, it is the result of how we live. If we give freely, Dana, we open our hearts and dissolve selfishness. Live with integrity, Sila, we remove guilt and inner conflict. Train our minds, Bhavana, we find clarity and deep peace. Through these practices, we stop searching for happiness outside and realize that it has been within us all along. We often ask, how can I be happy? But the real question is, are we willing to cultivate the conditions for happiness? The journey begins with a single step. Are we ready to take it? Or will we continue to feed the fire? The choice is always in our hands. Conclusion. The choice is ours. In the end, the choice between heaven and hell is not made after death. It is made in every moment of life. Every thought we think, every word we speak, every action we take. These are the bricks that build either a paradise of peace and happiness or a prison of suffering and regret. When we act with wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness, we cultivate a state of inner heaven, a life of peace, joy, and freedom. When we act with greed, anger, and ignorance, we create a state of inner hell, a life of turmoil, frustration, and suffering. This is not an abstract idea, it is something we can see and experience directly. Think about the times you have been patient, kind, and understanding. How did you feel? Probably light, peaceful, and fulfilled. Now think about the times you were consumed by jealousy, resentment, or fear. How did that feel? Likely heavy, tense, and draining. The Buddha's message is crystal clear. We are the architects of our own destiny. There is no external force that determines our fate, we shape it with our own minds. Just as a gardener carefully tends to their plants, we must nurture wholesome thoughts, actions, and habits to cultivate a flourishing life. Happiness is not given to us, it is something we must create. The question is, are we ready to take responsibility for our own joy? At every moment, life presents us with two doors. One leads to suffering, built on attachment, hatred, and ignorance. One leads to liberation, built on generosity, integrity, and wisdom. Which one will we choose? The answer lies not in the future, but in the choices we make today, right now, in this very moment.